Michelle?
Daniel,
OG Rose?
and today we're talking about a reflection on Anchor about filters, Instagram filters. You can use to change your face, your eyes, the colors of your hair, maybe give yourself wings, cat face, etc., so forth. So filters, what those do to our psyche, if they're good, if they're bad. There's really no such thing as pure bad or pure good, so it's always trade-offs and a mixture. So just the topic of filters, and how they work and what they mean for us, and how they make us think about ourselves today. Because if we can use filters, then we can always ask ourselves, why aren't we using filters, and should we use filters? Every technology creates new horizons and new questions. Once you have a cell phone that takes pictures, you can always ask yourself, should I be taking a picture of this beautiful tree? Should I be taking a picture of this event? Because the new technology brings with it new questions. So, that can happen with filters. So it's on Anchor, and I think it's an important topic because it's one of those things that everyone, if you're on social media, it's something you think about.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about like filters and what also what the term means if we think about it in other contexts, not just Instagram or social media. And if I'm thinking about like from my cooking perspective, I use a filter like a sieve or something like that. You use filters to, it's a filtration. You're kind of catching the impurities, right, or the larger things, or whatever the things
filter out.
Yeah, you filter out the things you don't, let's say you squeeze some fresh orange juice or something, and you're filtering out the pulp. Well, you would, put it through a filter or a sieve, which could be like a filter,
right,
to basically just have the juice itself. So I guess this helped me a little bit better with some of my initial considerations of the topic, because a line that's in that Anchor recording is about how we've lost complexity of complexion or something along those lines, because filters, what they essentially do, or I'm talking about really the pretty filters, or like the filters that make you look, for women, make you look like you have much longer eyelashes or makeup or clearer skin, is that they take, maybe not the augmentative type of stuff, but at least with the skin, actually the complexion of your skin, because that is what it is. It's a complexion. Your skin is called your complexion. Your facade is a complexion. And I think that's a great word, because we are complex, we are multifaceted, and our face is kind of the most exterior expression of the inner layers of ourselves. And so the filter does, what it does is kind of takes out impurities. Well, I think filters kind of do the same thing with complexion. They make it more smooth or airbrushed, and so they essentially take out some of the things that maybe somebody wouldn't consider as smooth or like as clear or whatever, and they take it away. Like the filter takes that away and makes it look different, And so I guess what got me thinking about that is how I think that there can be, there's something about filters that maybe isn't, Javier and I were talking about this. It's not like filters are all that different necessarily from other filters in our life that are physical, like that we put on our face, for example, makeup for women, or men, I guess,
sure,
of clothes, things like that. Those are filters too. But the whole point of my considerations on filters is that there is a lot more virtual exposure of people to people. And, people see one another through the web or through social media. I mean, I don't know if it depends on the person, right? If they see people more or less or the same amount of time.
sure.
Probably most people see real other, humans in their living day-to-day experience a lot as well. But, the filters being so easy to put on, right? I mean, the thing is that it can maybe make us lose touch with complexity in our own faces. And I I mean, then again, you might just be using it just to like look a little bit more peppy or something like
Oh,
that.
sure.
But,
Well, I mean, all technologies have to start with an innocence.
Sure.
I mean, you wouldn't use them if I'm just taking a picture of us at the party. I'm just taking a picture of the sunset. That's how it starts, but then it becomes an obsessive nervousness that if you're not taking pictures at the party, it means that you don't like the party, or if you're not constantly taking pictures of every moment of your children playing, you know, you're missing out on something, or if you don't take a picture of every sunset in some way that dishonors the sunset. So this nice ability to readily carry a camera on you with your phone to take pictures can quickly turn into create a certain anxiety and nervousness.
Yes.
Then you spend all your time at a party taking pictures of the party. You take you stop like seeing sunsets because you're always seeing them through your phone.
Yeah.
So likewise, filters. Yeah, I mean, you know, it can be pretty funny if you put a cat face on, or some of the filters and different things. But you know, once you start thinking about filtering out, and you're using these filters to say look prettier in your eyes, or to change how you look, you can start thinking about there are things on your face that you'd want to filter out. There are things about you that you want to filter out. And then there can also be this kind of sense of a nervousness of, well, if I don't use these filters, what if, you know, there's someone who might date me that won't because I didn't use the filter, and what if I just kind of look off, and what if people almost think it's irresponsible not to use the filter, in the same way that it would be irresponsible not to take pictures of your 4-year-old birthday, you know, the 4-year-old birthday party of your son. You know, don't you love them? Don't you want to preserve memories of it? You start getting this kind of, all these questions open up about what it means not to use the filter or not to take the picture.
Sure.
But of course, if you take that logic to its extreme, the logic does not present you with a notion of when you should be satisfied, where you've taken enough pictures or you've used enough of a filter. Like you mentioned makeup. You know, that can happen too with makeup, where you can always put a little more expensive makeup or a little more nicer makeup in different things. And I think you get into these questions, you say, oh yeah, well, what's the difference between filter and makeup? Well, makeup goes on your face. You know, you're wearing it. It is not, it's, you have to wear it. You can't wear a filter. There is something about a filter that is literally transforming your very physical appearance. That when the person sees you, it will not be possible for them in their lived experience to see you with that filter on. And so you're kind of setting them up. You could be setting them up for a shock or a certain disillusionment. And also it can feel like you're starting, if it's in a relational context, you could feel like you're starting the relationship, I don't want to say a lie, but from not a completely solid ground. It's like, everyone is tempted to put pictures up on social media that shows their best self, or, you know, their six-pack or different things like that. Well, that's eventually all going to be shattered, and then you're going to have to explain, you know, why you use that card, or you're going to have to kind of blow it off, and it can be an awkward thing. So the filter can risk hiding who you actually are, and really, when you're in a relationship, you're going to want reality. So, you know, you're going to want reality. And it can create a certain nervousness also, you know, about using it or not using it, or, you know, how you look and so on and so forth.
Right. So I'm chuckling so much to myself because when you said about, like, you know, you can make your profile pictures like, oh, okay, this is my best angle or my best shot. Yeah. But it's funny, I saw this meme where it was like your profile picture and it was like very regal, gallant, looked like Napoleon on a horse in his like best pose. And then it was like pictures you're tagged in. And it was just like this crappy picture of a guy on a horse, like kind of drunken. It was
That's
hilarious.
really funny. Oh, goodness, picture tagged in. Oh, wow, that's really funny.
Yeah. So funny.
So just disable tags and use
right. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I mean, it might seem like, I mean, I know you're going to say it's not, but maybe it's to some it might seem like a moot point. Like, okay, of course filters are not your face. Like, duh, that's why you wouldn't use them, because you're making yourself look in a way that is not yourself. And obviously then if you're going to meet the person, like let's say you're wanting to try to date someone or something, obviously hopefully they will see your real face soon enough. So you obviously would realize that would be kind of like false advertising if like all of your pictures are with like the high density makeup filters, and then suddenly they're like, oh, you know, unless you can like perfect that makeup look on your own.
Right.
But I guess I think about it a lot from maybe even younger generations, you know, who are still finding, I mean, golly, we're all still trying to find our way, find ourselves in a sense. But I think the confidence that comes with more decades and, I don't know, just realizing like what really matters or what doesn't matter.
Sure.
And we can all lose sight of that, but I think you get a better grasp on that with time. And I think though when you're a teenager or preteen, it's much harder to not get so caught up in, you know, comparing yourself to what other people look like at school, etc. And then like that already existed, let alone now with like social media and filters.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of that sense of like just kind of maybe wanting to just do the easy option of maybe looking a little nicer, a little bit more done up, and that's okay. I think it's okay to want to try to strive for beauty and for looking, even like feeling good in yourself, and therefore, you know, looking presentable and feeling good about that. But it's just that the ease of just pressing a button and, you know, suddenly you look so different, and I could imagine it causing even more self-esteem.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Conundrums for the 12-year-old or 13-year-old, you
Massive.
know.
Massive. I mean, I think the data shows that on the mental illness, etc. I mean, it's quite awful, and it leads to a lot of confusion. It leads to a lot of not sharing what the real self is versus how you present yourself online, and it's it's just for fun, but then it ceases to be for fun. I mean, there's a performative element, like we're talking about taking pictures with the phone or videos, or, you know, posting things on Facebook. There's this kind of performative element. We say, hey guys, I'm taking a selfie, and everyone's like giggling, selfie, funny, and yet we still do it. You know, it's a performance that you still participate in, and that still matters to you, even in the sort of ironic distancing that you place with the selfie, where you kind of like, hey, we're taking, you know, I know I'm taking a selfie, and there's something egotistical about it, but since I know it's egotistical, it's okay that I do it, and and then everyone's like, yeah, we do it too, and there's a performative element. Well, similarly, everyone says, hey, we know this is a filter and it's fake, and it's funny, but we still do it. And the performative element and acknowledging that it's fake simply hides actually a nervousness not to do it. But there's an ironic distancing that takes place that makes it spread. And so then not only is there, say, you're mentioning in high school or middle school, not only do you have, say, young ladies dealing with the pressure to use the filter, but there's then also this pressure of the performative element and the ironic distancing of the act that you have to convince people you know is ironically like cool, you're cool, like Mr. Ebert discusses, like you're cool about it. So you have all these layers where you feel pressure to do it, but then simultaneously have to do it in such a way that maintains an ironic distance. So you're always carrying out these social gymnastics that really aren't healthy and that are just quite confusing because it all becomes performative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that what I was going to say with selfies, I mean, I guess it's interesting because with that, like, there's the one side of it, obviously, that could be egotistical use of selfies, or, but at the same time, I've thought about this too, and we've talked about this, where it can also be a function of the ego to be self-deprecating in a sense of like, I'll never show my face, or I'll never do.
There's a ditch on either side of the road.
Like selfies, I don't think inherently necessarily are egotistical.
No more than a portrait.
Exactly.
Yes.
I think they in some ways, I think it's wonderful to embrace the way you really look and the fact that you are who you are. And if you show that to the world, then that's great. You would if you went out into the world. It's just a very interesting space because the virtual is always like you're kind of having to put yourself in front of people.
Yes,
I mean,
which feels inherently egotistical.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's something that just kind of seems inherently egotistical because you have to choose to put your face online and for people to see it. So it can feel as if, you know, it's inherently egotistical.
Yeah, and one could say like, well, you know, you choose to go out to, I don't know, say some coffee shop and, you know, people will see you there. But it's, I don't know, for whatever reason, maybe I'm not seeing it clearly, but it does feel so much more like you're making people see you online. Why is that?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's your profile. I mean, it's not like the coffee shop is the community's coffee shop per se. It's not your thing. Like, you are putting it up for one purpose and one person only, you know, to be seen or or for people to review, you know,
like
what you post.
To the coffee shop to
for
get
coffee. Right.
If people will see you, that's kind of the
it's more secondary. It's more secondary. I mean, if social media, the primary thing is socializing. But you can't have like a community profile picture. I mean, everyone has their own profile, right? I mean, you can start pages, but it starts with the individual.
And maybe people say like, well, the landing pad is kind of a little bit like the coffee shop because you don't control exactly what pops up on people's feeds. So that's true. That's true.
Sure.
So, yeah.
But still, it does have an inherent feeling of putting yourself out there that can feel like, look at me, look at me, look at me.
Yeah.
Which is not inherently the case. It is not inherently egotistical
Absolutely.
to use social media.
Agreed.
But it does raise a question of, is it, and how isn't it, and you have to think about it.
Yeah.
Well, the moment you're starting to just even have your brain oriented in the direction of those questions of thinking about yourself and am I out there, well, then you start wondering, how often am I liked? How much is my stuff viewed? And it begins to reflect back on your self-image. And if you're not getting the likes that you want, or if you're not getting the followers, then the pressure to use, well, maybe it's because I don't use filters. Really, there can be this pressure to change your image and your profile to try to do better. Yeah, because if you're wondering if there's something about social media that's inherently about you, well, then you start to go, well, I want to look the best I can. I want to put my best self forward. And you go, well, the filter can make me look better. And I want to put the best image I can out there. And if you're already kind of habituated to feeling like you have to make your self currency, it's almost like your self becomes a currency, you can start to feel like. And so then you're like, well, I should use filter to look the best I possibly can. I mean, basically, social media makes everyone feel like a marketer. Like, all businesses, if you started a business 30 years ago, you dealt with the tension of trying to convince people to invest money in you, like trying to convince them that to create value, and it can feel all the silly things you have to do, like make a logo like the Little Caesars guy, and make a little theme song to get people to pay attention to you. You have to do all these performative elements for people to buy your Big Mac or to buy your product or car, or whatever you had to do. Well, now what's happening is basically everyone is a business of themselves on social media, and so they're having to find little things to do in order to make a place for themselves to be seen. But of course, this runs the risk where in the past maybe it would have been easier to disassociate yourself with your job. You say, yeah, I do these things at work to get people to buy these products, but that's not me. Now it can kind of feel like that gap has been closed. So it can feel like the ego, the self, is the main driver in what you're doing, and it's very easy then to become very self-focused while simultaneously just treating yourself like a product. So it's this weird sort of double action that can occur where you're reducing yourself to a product for people to consume, and you're unable to disassociate yourself with that product. You can't go home at night from it, per se, like you used to do with work. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be the case, because social media, if you can get straight in your head that it's, say, a tool for business or a tool to stay connected, it doesn't have to become these things.
Yeah.
But I think it's very easier for younger people who don't remember, especially if you don't remember a world without the internet. I mean, increasingly, people are on social media who were born, say, in 2002. They don't remember a world where they weren't connected all the time.
Right.
Well, that's going to really make it feel like social media is everything. Like, getting a strong following on social media is everything, and that's the center, your center focus. And so then, why wouldn't you use filters? Why wouldn't you do these things to boost your profile as much as possible? It would be the equivalent of someone having a product that they're trying to sell to the general public that they could improve and make a little better, but they're not going to do it. Why wouldn't they do it? Of course they would do it. They're going to, so that it all kind of feeds, all those things feed into the pressure of using a filter.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely think there's a marketing element that is true about filters in general. Mm-hmm. And I think everything you said on the marketing the product and the person as the product, I thought that was very, very good. I think you're right, though, that if you are able to understand, like, not fall into the trap that it can be, then you can use social media and instead of it use you.
Sure.
Right.
That's right.
And so I think it's a great tool. It's a great tool to use, but you do have to be aware of the ways in which it can use you, and not allow those things.
The social media companies want you to basically be on it all the time. Mm-hmm. It lends itself in the direction of using you more than you using it. It wants your data. It wants your attention constantly. So you have to be on guard for that.
Sure.
Because it also knows that you might be on guard for that. So it's also trying to out-strategize you
right.
On those levels. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah, and I think that I think that's a lot of the idea of the marketing. You know, it's like when you see like even just a box of like, you know, Frosted Flakes or something, and like there's the enlarged, you know, they always say like enlarged to show texture or something, and it's like the Frosted flake is huge on the spoon, and then you like open up the package and it's, you know, maybe a quarter the size or something like that.
Right.
And I think that's maybe a little bit about, there is something extremely like just kind of, let's just make this a little bit better or a little bit longer or a little bit, you know, peachier looking, so that it can just have a better aesthetic.
Yes.
And again, I think there's something great about the aesthetic. It's just that it's not, in that way, it's not really okay. And this is a point Javier made, which is a good point. The people who made the filter did something kind of complex. Like they made this, they coded a filter, and that's pretty amazing that it can do that. They can do that.
Yes.
At the same time, the people using it are not doing anything complex. You know, they're pressing a button.
That's
now
right.
the complexity becomes their relationship with that filter, right?
Well, arguably, when you get into the great makeup artists, it is a work of art.
Absolutely.
You are a painting.
Yes.
You know, it's one thing, but you are literally doing the work of making yourself a painting or submitting yourself to the artwork of another person and being a canvas. Arguably, there's the labor that goes into makeup is significantly different than pressing a button. Just simply from the value or what it means to you. You know, if you have to learn the skills of the great makeup artists, and then, you know, it's a different ballgame in its meaning.
Yes.
It's much more likely that you're going to understand that this is not an act of you hiding. This is an act of you or trying to take out blemishes. This is an act of you this is an artistic act that you are participating in.
Yes.
Just like great fashion, for example.
Yes.
Of course, it's a gradient. Of course, these categories blur, but the filter certainly seems, because of the ease and because of the fact that it's not turning you so much into a canvas, so much as it's accentuating details. Kind of, almost the filters want to work in such a way that it makes it seem like filters aren't used. Right? You know, now not all filters can accomplish that, but they want to hide the fact that a filter is used and thus blur the line between the real and the digital. Whereas with makeup, it's clear as day that there was makeup used. It's clear as day as there's eyeliner and paint and so on and so forth, that that the person is being a canvas. Yeah, so I mean, when you're dealing with makeup, and especially doing the great artistry of makeup, it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of thought, it takes a lot of planning. And that does seem different, just in how that you would psychologically think about makeup if you approach it as an art, from the pressing of a button to make a filter. Sure, maybe the people who designed the filter originally are participating in an art form. Coding is arguably an art form in some capacity.
Right.
But the individuals using the filter, it would be different. And sure, both involve changing how the face appears or how a person looks. But I think we can say there's a clear difference between, say, Wallace Stevens or Flannery O'Connor and the romance novels you can pick up in the back of the CVS or the drugstore or something like that. There's a difference there, and they affect the consciousness differently. The mind that takes on Dostoevsky is formed differently from the mind that takes on the drugstore romance novel. Right. They both involve words. They both are books, but they don't hit the person the same way. And so likewise the filter and the makeup, even if they are dealing with something cosmetic, arguably, it would be erroneous to assume that they are equivalent.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I was thinking as like a counter in a way. I mean, you know, there are many different types of filters these days. There are so many. And, you know, some are just going to, you know, try and make the image look like a Polaroid or... And there can be some cool kind of artsy things one can do with that.
Sure.
And even with the face filters, I think just again having kind of being able to have a healthy relationship in a sense, either just to realize, well, they are there, and I guess if one is going to use them, just as long as they don't start to become used by them. That just to have that proper kind of relationship with them again. Sure. The other thing too is that, I mean, some filters though, I guess what I mean to say is like, okay, an image. Oh right, if you're like if somebody is seeing you in person, there's a lot more three-dimensional space and lighting and dynamic lighting, etc. that's going on. So maybe one would say like, well, see, a filter is just, depending on which one you're talking about, is just kind of adding that kind of vividness that
Sure.
that one would have if they were actually with you, but it's that kind of can get flattened out by just the regular camera or image or something like that.
Sure. Sure.
So that's true too. That's true too. But it's just, I guess the risk would be if it's just, oh, I could look a little bit better or something, which I know sounds so petty and possibly, but obviously they make these filters for, particularly it seems, women to feel, they're literally, some that are called pretty or makeup or, sexy, whatever it is. And it's just like, okay,
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, there are different filters for different effects.
Right.
I don't think you're going to, put up a filter of you wearing a cat mask for your date, or you're not going to try to get a date with that, or the filter of making it look like an old Polaroid. There are different kinds of filters. The filters that I think are problematic, or that raises a bunch of questions, are the filters that try to hide the fact that they're filters. They tend to,
like, they literally change your face and one couldn't know necessarily.
Yes.
Like if they just saw this picture of you.
Yes.
Without Instagram telling you that the filter's being used at the top, they'd be like, oh, this is what this person looks like.
Yes, and
Really,
the pressure
not,
to use that kind of filter.
Exactly.
None of these filters, especially like that one, if we go back to what we were saying, and you're marketing yourself as a product, why wouldn't you use these filters?
Right.
You'd almost be irrational not to use.
Right, or if you're just thinking like, okay, I'm online dating or something, like obviously it's like, well, this makes me look. I mean, I know it's kind of like, obviously this is not going to work in the long term.
Sure.
But for some, I don't know, just if somebody's feeling like really like lonely, or they really want to just be able to make some connection with somebody, or they've never dated, they really want to date somebody, whatever, then like they might be tempted to just, utilize this brush up filter, whatever, that's going to be able to maybe get them more views or more interest or something.
And critically, technology does not tell you when you should stop using it.
Right.
Technology wants you to use every feature you possibly can, so they can increase your data collection, they can increase their profit, et cetera, so forth. Technology does not teach you measure. You have to teach yourself measure. But as we've been discussing this whole time, technology always brings a pressure with it not to measure, to take as many pictures of you can, of every sunset you ever see constantly all the time, to always be texting, to always be calling someone. Because if you have a cell phone and you could call your friend, why don't you call your friend? Don't you love them? There's these existential pressures that technology brings about.
Right.
And the filter similarly brings an existential tension to use it. The reason I think this is important, one, to identify that technology will not teach you measure. To weigh when you should use it and which filters you should use, discernment, discernment, all these things. The reason this is very important, because one, that would mean you have to cultivate it yourself, but increasingly technology is putting you in a world where you're never outside the technology. I mean, now we're talking meta with Facebook, where you're going to be connected all the time. People always have their cell phones. So when do you separate yourself enough from the technology to create a space in which you can learn measure of how to use the technology? Because it would almost seem like by definition you'd have to be apart from the technology to figure out how to use it well, or to use it in a measured way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I mean, maybe it's a little biased. I would say that I feel as though philosophy will help you a little bit with this area.
Yes.
I mean, a lot bit actually, because it's going to help with that whole aspect of measure, like you're talking about.
Yes. Well, philosophy is also going to teach you that it should teach you not to be superficial. It should be teaching you to be deep, right? I mean, it's philosophy. Where, if that's the case, your likelihood of you using social media for superficial means, as opposed to maybe meeting people that you can start real relationship with on deeper subjects, these whole intellectual communities forming online, that you can exchange your videos and your lectures and different things. I mean, that's a wonderful thing.
Yes.
It will help you not be superficial. So, and that ability to not use these things superficially seems really, really quite important.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, I think you made a great point when we were talking about this, I don't know when we last talked about it, when we were talking about it, about how it could potentially raise a question, and maybe more into the future too, of, how much should the virtual play a role in your aesthetic, or like in your, in your physicality, basically, in your aesthetic, in your phenotype, in what you look like to the world,
Yes.
And that might seem like just way futuristic type of a question, but I don't think that's
No,
I mean, I think that, you know, again, I think if you've got like the philosophical grounding, if you have an ability to use, you know, use it like a tool, use social media like a tool, and not, you know, maybe get sucked into some of the ego traps of that
Yes.
it is, then I think it can be a wonderful thing. And I think it can be very clear that obviously you would only ever want yourself to be seen as yourself.
Well, the reason this is extremely important is because
Yeah.
the topic of filters is the questions that arise
Yes.
around filters. We are going to be entering a world quite soon where you're going to have deep fake technology. You're going to
Right.
have the ability to create these videos of yourself where you're doing basically anything you want, and they are going to look incredibly realistic. They are going to look like that they're you. I mean, you see the technology they're using now with deep fakes to basically, you know, make someone like Barack Obama say or do whatever. They can. I mean, Adobe had a presentation where they were able to take a guy's voice and basically just make him say whatever they wanted to. They took a sample of his voice and then they just programmed it. It sounded just like him. It was completely disturbing.
Insane.
That's the
Insane.
technology that's coming.
Yeah.
It is
And that's
is very believable that young people will have access to that technology and that they will be able to change their voice on recordings. They'll be able to change how they sound on the phone. They'll be able to change how they look or what they can do in videos.
right. Like, and you could even think like
They'll be able
and
to filter their entire lives.
well, that's the thing. Or like if you wanted to, if there'd be like virtual reality dates, like there'll
Yes.
be virtual. If there were like virtual reality dating spaces,
Yes.
you could potentially just be wearing a particular filter or
Yes.
fashion or
Yes.
something,
Yes.
and it's like, but this is all virtual. Like it's not actually what you're wearing or what you have, what your face, you know, quite looks like exactly. And so I think it is very. I think these questions kind of come into more of some of the. I think that's kind of why I think a lot about the younger generations. I mean, hopefully we can be considered young too, but
sure.
and just the questions of like technology and its advancement, or whatever you want to call it, its trajectory.
Sure.
Because I could only see that becoming more of a question
It will
for
be,
people.
it will be
And I-
existentially
yes,
unbelievable.
existentially very weighty, very
Yes.
very very difficult.
Well, and I will just add
Think
as
about-
well, when the deepfakes come out, and you will they will be able to make videos of, say, you know, if you're in the QAnon thing, they'll be able to make videos of politicians engaging in horrible activities that will look real, that you will see. You will have videos of Barack Obama meeting with terrorist organizations, for example. You'll have videos of your or your friends doing things that you're like, well, there's no way they would have done that, and you won't even be able to tell what's true or what's false anymore.
So what's the hope for that, Daniel? Like what's what?
Well,
kind of
one,
keeps
philosophical
us-
ability is
well,
going to
duh.
be
Yeah.
incredibly important. I mean, right now you exist in a world where basically people trust video. They say, well, if it's on video, we know it happened, right? That world's ending very soon. And just because you saw a video of it, there's no guarantee it happened at all.
Sure.
When you have that level of fakeness that is going to permeate the system, and that's going to be very existentially difficult. I mean, we're talking about the fake news crisis now. I mean,
Right.
it's going to take off like crazy.
Do you think though that perhaps just as we like as I think I don't know. I think there is on the whole, because again people know that they're going to be seen in real life. It's like, oh, okay, well I know filter's only going to
Yes.
cover me for so long, for example. I mean, if somebody chooses to use it. I mean, do you think that there could be kind of a like a collective pushback to that, because it's kind of it is very disturbing and
You will have a bunch of people push against it, but what will happen is it will be up to the corporate powers to determine. It's like, fine, you don't have to use this technology. You don't have to be part of the system that exposes you to deepfakes or that will tempt you to use deepfakes so that you can show videos of your best possible self or whatever. But if you don't, you're not going to be able to participate in the workforce. You're not going to be able to participate in the democratic process or so on and so forth. You will be put in a situation where you're basically made to feel like you have to be Amish, you know, or completely disconnect. If you don't totally disconnect, you're going to be entering into this superstorm of epistemological uncertainty and existential tension. And you know, that's a different subject on the way that our very sense of reality will be totally destabilized when the deep fakes show up. And we already know that the algorithms are making sure that our search engine results are tailored to what we've already looked like, so that contributes to bubbles and so on and so forth. But a dimension that I don't think people talk about is what will the teenager think when they can use deepfake technology? Will they feel like it would be irresponsible not to use it because look, everyone else is using it to make the to change their voice so that they can get so that they sound better for the other people, so that they get a better social click, or that they can make videos of them doing really cool things. Or maybe, there's a video where they're, say, playing the violin and they miss some notes. Well, they can just go in there and just dock it up to where you didn't know they edited it at all, because you'll have the deep fake technology to make it look like there was no editing that occurred. Well, of course, this also will open up the problem when you have real videos of people being their real selves and doing real things. You'll wonder if it's actually real, and how will anyone ever be able to verify it other than to meet them live and to see them live and to do that. But you're going to be so trained to only want to show yourself online because that's where you can touch up your differences and your blemishes and look the best you possibly can, that meeting in real life could become extremely hard on people. I mean, it could become very difficult. They may get to the place where it's just too psychologically overwhelming to encounter people in reality, and yet the real will be the only place that you can trust, because the online will be so malleable, so easily editable, with all the technology that's coming.
I mean, definitely. I mean, I think that raises so many big questions and thoughts. I mean, the idea, it does make me think, though, perhaps the silver lining to the disturbing deepfake thoughts is like that, maybe it would make the real
more valuable.
Even more, yeah, like, I mean, maybe perhaps like there could be something about that where like the real is so sacred because it is real, like it is, and it just kind of like you just let the other world, whatever you want to call it, metaverse or whatever, just kind of jettison into
oblivion.
Yeah, pretty much. And then like the real becomes very, very sacred.
Well, that's a very interesting thought. I like that thought. I mean, there is arguably people today, there's a dialectical return to the phenomenological and real that is pushing against the digital and the Cartesian and, to a philosophy of suchness as opposed to a philosophy of, idealism or the mind or whatever. So.
Right. Kind of like getting out your notepad and, really like, I don't know, it's almost like having the addresses of your friends or having, kind of like very much locating in kind of giving physicality to the connections you make, whether they are day to day in your town or abroad or through the web.
There will be a day where being real will be the true rebel. If we're talking about rebellion, to rebel against the system will be to use makeup instead of a filter. That's, what we're ultimately pointing toward, exactly, like a philosophy that says, no, I'm not going to use my cell phone. No, I'm not going to, sure, I have to use the internet for work, but I am going to very intentionally choose not to engage in certain technologies or certain practices versus others. There will arguably be a period where engaging in the real will be rebellion. Whereas in the past, if we talk about like cyberpunk or the hackers, there's kind of this culture of the online is the kind of rebellious, or there was a period at least, more rebellious phase. It will easily shift, be a Hegelian dialectical move where being real will actually be the rebellion.
I wonder, because there is such a cool opportunity space. I mean, at least I know we can attest to of finding and meeting really incredible people, through the internet.
Sure.
Who are on their own journeys on philosophical pursuits or creative pursuits, whatever it is.
Yes.
How can that bridge back to the real? I mean, I guess obviously you do have real connections with those people, maybe not just through social media, maybe through email, through perhaps phone calls or things like that. Maybe even you have the opportunity to visit or dwell with one another at some point in time. So, I mean, I guess it's just, can one garner some of the things, so the good of the internet connections and bring them back home in a sense?
Oh yeah, I think it gets to the question of are you using this technology to replace the real or in a commitment to the real? You know, if you're using the internet to discover these philosophies, they're all hungry to get at the true, beautiful, and the good, to discover the real. You know, they're using the internet to determine what is true, what is real. They're not trying to escape it. They're trying to get at it. That's another reason why, say, there's a big difference between using a filter that's obviously a filter and that everyone can see it's a filter, and a filter that is hiding the fact that it's used, that's concealing itself. In the same way that there is a problem with a relationship to a cell phone that makes you miss out on things happening right in front of you. Like if you having a cell phone on you makes you feel nervously responsible to constantly film everything around you, because you're like, what if I miss it? And that, as a result, you're not really in the world very much. You're just filming it. Well, that's not a good relationship with the phone, and you need to put it away because it's keeping you from the world, as opposed to genuinely capturing special moments of the world that you can then keep with you for the rest of your life to remember how wonderful life is. You know, when you take a picture of that birthday party and then you get it, you know, you hang it in your garage or something, or you see it on your laptop, you go, oh yeah, those people, and it's like, boom, that's why life is good. That's very different from, you know, having thousands upon thousands of pictures you never look at. So you got thousands of pictures you never look at, and you weren't even fully present in the event. Now, only you can know as an individual if you have an unhealthy relationship to taking pictures or not. So this is not a carte blanche statement, or what, you know, this isn't a blanket statement or whatever. But asking yourself those questions: Am I using technology to get at the real, or is it replacing the real? Those are the questions you'll want to ask.
Right.
And it will be hard to ask those questions. And like before you use a filter, is this filter hiding the real? Or is it getting at the real? Or is it the same will arise when it comes to deep fake technology, when it comes to the metaverse, all these different things. One will need to ask themselves if the technology is replacing the real or if it's helping honor the real.
Right, absolutely. And every technology, you know, one always has to ask that question. You know how Neil Postman talks about it. Every type of technology has to be considered for what it is in and of itself. You know.
Yes.
And technically, like a pillow is a technology. You know.
Yeah,
So,
and I should add before I forget. You know, Slavoj Zizek has this part where, you know, he's talking about these kids playing RPG video games where they can create their own character, and people are like, oh, they're living a fantasy because they're making themselves this big bulky knight when they're really this kind of scrawny kid. And you know, Zizek makes the point, it's like, well, maybe in the video game that's the only, maybe they actually are in their true essence a strong bulky character, and it's only in the video game that their true essence can come out. So it does this kind of reversal. The point is that it's very possible that there are some true parts of an individual and true parts of reality that can't come out without technology. So we can't assume that technology doesn't actually sometimes increase the horizons of the real and actually let truth come out that otherwise would not be able to come out. Say the invention of writing or the printing press that enables, you know, as Walter Ong and different people talk about, that enables the mind to think complex thoughts that it otherwise would not be able to think because it's too busy trying to memorize everything. So the book stores data for the human brain so you can have more scientific treatises, he talks about different things, which arguably gets more at the real. Those scientific treatises can help us get a better grasp on the universe. So we also, I just want to add, one of the, we have to develop we can't just assume that technology gets in the way of the real. It may open up possibilities of the real that you couldn't get to without it.
Right.
But it would require a case-by-case discernment.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, definitely. It always takes that type of discernment on, you know, like we said, case by case, one by one. Right. And I mean, I think though, always kind of remembering the power of, I don't know, I guess, you know, I'm always interested in the body, the physical. Sure. And I think that, you know, we talk a lot too in the philosophy of glimpses, you know, with Thomas and Javier, about like the idea of the phenomenology being so important, you know, to our understanding of self and reality, the world. So I think, you know, again, I think that's a great point you make, Daniel, whether it's social media or any technology, you know, does it actually equip you to be, you know, more in touch with the real, you know, in touch in a physical kind of way, almost even. Yes. In that way, in that respect, then it's like, you know, it's being used. There's something good in its use. Sure. You know, and I think there can be really great things that can come from that,
Yeah, now the counter to all this, now the problem might be that we're going to get to an age where there are so many technological options, and the amount of discernment will be so great that one will have to exercise.
Right, it's like at this rate of like
technological,
maybe right now it's relatively
manageable.
It's manageable to still
Yes.
use it in a healthy
Yes.
way or
Yes.
something, or use it in a useful way.
Yes.
But
But you see, the problem will also be, but once it gets super fast, even faster, or you have more possibilities,
or more like all encompassing
yeah,
or something,
and
right?
it fractalizes or whatever, exponentiate. I mean, it will be very, very hard, and it will be notably hard for the 14-year-old in a middle school, or maybe if you're 38 and you were born in 1988, 1989, you remember you remember before the internet.
Yeah,
you can
you
remember
remember before cell phones.
Yeah,
Pretty
you
much,
can. So you can keep things in perspective. But if you're 14 and you're given the power of deepfakes, the power of filters, the power of social media, the power of meta, all of these different things, and they're just given to you, the likelihood that you can discern how to use that technology well, and not be overwhelmed by the existential anxiety that will result from all of the things you could do with that technology, and that your peers will make you feel like you should use with that technology, that will be quite challenging. Basically, maybe if we start teaching philosophy in the second grade or something like that, or
right, philosophy, and go outdoors and climb the trees and
I mean, it's going to be very difficult, and
smell the flowers.
I mean, you can get into just the design of communities in suburbia. We can get into Robert Putnam, Bowling Alone. All the sociologists talk about how people are afraid to be outside, or the families are not at home, so they need the kids to be babysit, basically, and they use the technology for that. Also, all these different sociological factors that are also contributing to a lifestyle of perpetual plug-in, where you're plugged in all the time. Even people who are older, who are, say, 50 or 40 or whatever, I mean, they spend a ton of time on their laptop because of work. So you're already plugged in, and it's just very easy to just move to another level of plugging into the metaverse or different things like that. So it will be very challenging. I think it will be notably challenging on the young. And I think the topic of Instagram filters actually is on the same gradient as choices that will arise with deepfakes and meta and things like that. And so thinking about filters now is really important. And again, I just think there's an argument to be made that the real rebel is the person who's going to get on the...
I like that term.
Yeah, the rebel, the real rebel. Oh, there you go, Michelle. The real rebel will be the person who, say, gets on the metaverse and chooses a depiction of themselves that looks exactly like they look in the real life. Or that they are going to design their metaverse to be exactly like their real home. Or, like to really not use any of the flourishes of it at all. To really bring the real to the metaverse or something, and of course not to use it at all to the extent you can, or like to use. There is an active rebellion, say, to post a profile picture without any flourishes, or to say no, I'm not going to use these filters. Or in any way, I'll
not. Post this picture I was tagged in.
Yeah. There is an active rebellion. Now, again, I'm not. Obviously, everyone knows the profile picture is a nicer picture.
Yeah.
But we're talking about the filters that are artificially changing you that hide the fact that they're present. That you could get away with. That you could get away with.
Yeah, and I think
it will be real rebellion not to use them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, the other interesting facet of the image you portray through social media or whatever, dating site, whatever it is, it's like you kind of choose. Again, you're very specifically choosing what angle a person is seeing of you or what they're seeing of you. And I think that's very, very fascinating because in real three-dimensional life, it's just, there you are in space, walking to the coffee counter and back or whatever. And it's just, it's much more I mean, obviously for lack of a better term, it's unfiltered. It's just very raw, unedited, just play-by-play of life. And and so I think I don't know, perhaps just think about that experience versus one's online presence or experience, and we have that terminology, online presence. And I think the thing that I think is going to be important, I think personally for younger generations, is to always kind of like give real stock to like your actual I know it sounds so silly, but it's like your actual physical presence. And that doesn't mean you can't have some online presence, but your real presence is the actual presence, right? That's the actual present of the existence of existence one to another.
I mean, the great challenge will be to be a real rebellion. A real rebel.
Real rebel.
You know,
I love
a real
it.
rebel.
I love it.
And it will not be easy. You know, especially if you're trying to say, how do I be a real rebel online? Well, we know of all the filters that are like unfiltered, or what it's really like to be a parent. One of the things that's very hard is the real gets absorbed into the scripted. It gets absorbed into the
like
virtual. It has a feedback loop. You have all these videos where people, I'm going to show you the real life, and everyone's now talking about the real gritty life, but it all feels scripted. It all feels performative.
That's why I do really like what Ebert does on Instagram.
Oh, sure.
I love it, where he's just like, some other person just take over my Instagram.
Yeah.
So
I mean, well, there's a kind of,
fun.
he's fighting the status anxiety, Deadpool, all these different things that are so important. It is very difficult to be real on social media without the virtual, the social media absorbing that act of real rebellion and making it in service of the virtual. So you're going to have to really be strategical. You're going to have to really think. It will not be self-evident what it means to be a real rebel. You'll have to really think about it.
Well, it kind of points to a deeper question, and maybe this is a talk for another time, but it does make me think about, can revolution or rebellion in the kind of like
constructive.
Can it be constructive, and can it be done within?
Well, the term revolution means a circle. It always comes around. That's one of the great jokes. It depends. Not all revolutions and rebels are equal. Some do, in fact, work, and some have made a difference. If we use the traditional comparison, what's the difference between the American Revolution and the French Revolution, or the Russian Revolution? There are differences here. There are revolutions and rebels that change the world for the better, but a lot of times they do just get absorbed into the system. Or they tear everything down without any idea of what they're going to replace it with and make it worse.
Right, and maybe it's like a dual action where within the system there are kind of game changers, and then people just jettison out of the system because they're like, that's not working. We're just going to go do this separate thing, this other thing. So maybe it's both, because in both places someone might be met by that change, or that kind of like the rebel in a good sense, like the one who gets the person back in touch with the real.
Well, there's the strategies of effective rebellion, quote unquote, effective social change. That is one of the deepest, most profound questions around. We can get into Hannah More on Fierce Convictions with Dr. Pryor and her effect in overcoming slavery. We can get into all of the John Hunters, To Change the World, sociologists, there's religious circles talk about this all the time, because what does it mean to, if you believe in a certain, in the world but not of it kind of language that you see in Christianity. The questions of social change and how to bring them about are quite large. Right. And it also becomes very, very specific to the enterprise that one is trying to change. Right. I mean, there's, you have the Benedict option too, that they took, which is a kind of, it's Christian separation, but not Christian isolationism, these different things. So what would it look like to be a real rebel? That's something we should start thinking about now.
Yes, exactly.
Because we do see from history that revolutions that don't think about what they're going to do when the time comes or after they succeed, they tend to fail. Right. You have to think about it ahead of time, or you're just going to get captured. Your effort of fighting for the real will become a posting on Instagram.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Michelle, this has been real.
It's been real, Daniel. Yeah. It's been very, very real.
This has been real. For more by OG Rose, please visit ogrose.com. Anchor, Instagram, all these metaverse... whatever. I don't even know. It's really bad
this
because
has been two deep fakes having a conversation.
It's going to be so bad because I'm going to mention Aristotle's metaphysics, and people will be like, Zuckerberg was alive in the great back then. I'm going to be
like, oh no.
No, I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, oh no. It's going to be like Heidegger's being in Facebook. I'll be like, oh no. It's like this is what the kids read these days. Oh boy. Oh my God. But anyway, for more, ogrose.com. Thank you for your time.